Good morning, everybody. This session of the not-for-profit update is building an engaged nonprofit board. So my name is Tanya Quigley. I'm an audit partner at Cerini and Associates.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Teta. I'm a director of internal audit over at Cerini and Associates. We work closely with a wide range of nonprofit organizations, schools, service providers, advocacy groups, and we're often trying to help them strengthen their financial oversight, internal controls, and operational effectiveness. But one of the most critical success factors we've seen across high-performing nonprofits is an engaged and informed board of directors. So I know through my internal audits, we often identify governance gaps, whether it's just a matter of unclear expectations, weak financial monitoring, or a lack of strategic focus. And these kinds of findings show just how essential a strong board could be to the mission of a nonprofit. Board engagement is not just a compliance issue, but it's also a capacity issue. And in today's environment, where nonprofits are facing increased scrutiny, donor expectations, and workforce challenges, boards have to be active. They should be diverse and they should be purpose-driven. So our roles, Tanya and I, we support nonprofit governance by helping boards understand their fiduciary responsibilities. We help them build transparency, but ultimately we look to position their organizations for a sustainable impact. And when boards are aligned and engaged, aligned with the mission and engaged, the entire organization operates with much greater clarity, accountability, and resiliency.
Yep.
Resilience.
I agree completely. So now we're going to go through the agenda. So these are some of the topics we're looking to cover. So diversity and modernizing your board composition. So why is having a diversified board so important, and how it can play a role in the success of a nonprofit, as well as best practices to recruiting the right board members. We'll be going over effective onboarding strategies. So the approach for transitioning new board members and having the right plan in place to ensure an effective start for those new board members. We'll be covering accountability and expectations for your new board members or even existing board members as well. So they should be aware of what's expected of them and the different tools that can be used to formalize those expectations and uphold accountability. There's a few slides on effective board meetings. So board meetings are limited as to time. So we want to make the most of that time as board members. So we'll go over strategies to organize these meetings that result in effective board discussions and resulting in, decision-making as well. The CEO and board chair relationship. So that's a very important, we'll emphasize the importance of that relationship as well as setting the different responsibilities of each role and how important it is to keep that separate as well. And then addressing the engagement gaps. So in your board, what are the gaps in your current board? Maybe some new board members need to join on to fill those gaps. Regardless, so we will go over several strategies used to enhance that board member engagement. And the last topic is the power of purpose-driven boards. So we'll go over ways to engage your board members to create a stronger purpose-driven board. A purpose-driven board is more powerful, it's more impactful for the nonprofit organization. So please jot down any questions in the Q&A chat. We'll address them as we can, or we can address them more at the end of the presentation.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to cover is diversifying and modernizing your board composition. It's a topic that's more critical than ever. It used to be, maybe just like the older people, the more experienced people, and that's not like what nonprofits really need today. According to Board Source's Leading with Intent 2021 report, over 78% of nonprofit members are white. And even when the communities they're serving aren't, they are. So This misalignment can impact everything. It can impact everything from strategy to trust. When your board reflects your clients, it's much easier to build trust and relevance within the area that you're serving. We had worked with a nonprofit in New York that was serving primarily Hispanic and Black populations, and took a look at their board composition and saw that it was 90% white, and it was time to take action. So this nonprofit created a board diversity audit, and they began recruiting bilingual professionals and lead advocates from the communities that they were trying to serve. And as a result, they saw a 25% increase in patient satisfaction. They were able to launch a more culturally competent outreach, and they even attracted some new donors from minority-owned businesses. So it definitely made a difference.
So changing the face of boards and embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion in your board. So why does DEI matter? DEI has been more forefront of conversations in the past few years, not only in businesses, but it should be done at the board level as well. So DEI drives better decisions and deeper community connections. Because as Erin mentioned before, having a board composition that's reflective of the community you serve is more impactful, and it's visible from the outside world. So think about bringing lived experiences to your board. For example, maybe adding a former program participant to join your board, or maybe sit in on your board. Becoming a board member is a commitment, so it might be something to explore. But having, again, that former program participant can bring a unique insight to help what worked for them when they went through the program. Or it could give some feedback for maybe some improvements based on their experience, at the program level. So board members are generally not as connected to the program itself. They're more at the higher level of seeing how the organization's operations are going and, just the overall governance, but at the program level, it might not be so deeply connected to. So again, that type of board member could bring insight to the board meetings and be helpful for any decision-making on, maybe future funding for the program or modifications of any of those major programs that the organization has. They can also play a key role in donor storytelling, which has a larger impact for donors. Donors like to see the results of the nonprofit, their mission. So that could help increase, fundraising goals. Having a diverse board, it spurs innovation and avoids groupthink. So if board members are typically one-sided with how they're thinking, having new members or members from different backgrounds, that can add new perspective to board decisions, lead discussions in a new direction that wasn't there previously. And everyone comes from different backgrounds. And so having that diversity is key. So key practices, broaden recruitment, explore ways to retain diverse voices through inclusion, and build a culture of equity and respect. Again, you have different board members from different backgrounds. You're all there for the one mission of the nonprofit, to see it succeed and see it grow. So there's a level of respect and equity there. And then bring diverse perspectives to the board discussions and decisions. So really the bottom line here is a board that is diverse is not just in race and ethnicity, but in age, experience, geography, lived experience. It's more effective. It brings more innovation and more connection to the community that it serves. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Next, we're going to talk about recruiting millennials and Gen Z to your nonprofit boards. This is a place where a lot of boards struggle. It's hard to bring in the younger generations, particularly millennials and Gen Z. More so not just bringing them in, but also engaging them meaningfully. The reality is that millennials and Gen Z are the future of leadership. So, your giving and your advocacy, they bring fresh ideas, they bring energy, and they also have digital fluency, which is absolutely essential in today's fast-moving world. The millennial group born between 1980 and 2000 are often more so, this is generally speaking, but they tend to be more community-oriented and mission-driven. So many of them, came of age during events like 9/11. They remember the 2008 financial crisis, and they value transparency, flexibility, authenticity. They want to support causes that align with their own personal values. And then you have the Gen Z group, and those are born after 95, and these are the true digital natives. They care deeply about social justice, climate change, and equity. They may communicate differently. They communicate through memes and emojis, TikTok videos, but don't let that fool you, because they also tend to be very sharp, value-driven, and they become incredibly engaged when they're given a chance to lead. So why does this matter to you? Why bring them on? Is because having them on your board isn't just about having a younger face at the table. It's about bringing in some new skills and some new energy. We had worked with a food justice not-for-profit that started a young professionals advisory board and brought in about 10 Gen Z members who were like super passionate about the cause. We saw that over 6 months, these 10 members had revamped the entire organization's Instagram presence. They led a viral video campaign, and they got engagement increased by over 200%. So that's a great model. You should start with maybe like an advisory board or committees, and then that helps create like a leadership pipeline. Some of the best practices we've seen work well is by leveraging your networks differently. So you want to reach out to them through LinkedIn, alumni associations, or mission-aligned social groups instead of just depending on that word of mouth. Another thing to consider is when working with these groups, you should think about offering flexibility. A lot of younger professionals maybe can't meet every Tuesday at 7 o'clock. So you might want to consider having hybrid options or rotating your committee assignments. And then finally, I would say value their contributions. They may not bring in the big financial dollars right away. I mean, maybe eventually, but they can offer you digital strategy. They're rich with community influence, and they're good at storytelling. And that's what's going to engage your donors.
Yeah, and anyone that's, on the younger side coming into the board, if they've never served on a nonprofit board before, might be good as a mentorship program for, senior board members to, kind of show them the ropes and just, explain a little bit of what they're, what they're signing up for, which, we will also get to later on about, effective onboarding strategies. Okay, so going into recruiting the right board members. So now that we've talked about bringing in younger voices, let's talk about recruiting the right board members overall. So one of the most common challenges we hear from nonprofits is that, we need bodies on the board. We love to take whoever says yes, because those are people willing to volunteer their time, but do they really know what they're getting into? But that's a scarcity mindset. So a best practice is to avoid that mindset. The truth is the board service is a privilege, it's not a favor. And if that's treated as such, then you will attract stronger candidates. So it starts with being intentional. So too often boards recruit based solely on connections, like who do we know, word of mouth. That is an easy way to bring on new board members, but instead try to think about maybe what do we need? What are the gaps that we have? And that's, going to be a common theme throughout this presentation is filling those gaps in your board. So the best practice here is to seek board members with, again, diverse expertise and skills, as a board, do an evaluation every year or as needed to kind of see what those gaps are. So in the process, assess the board needs for balance and diversity. This is where a board composition matrix could be helpful. So this, again, can be used to identify gaps and skills where it's on paper. It's not just, in discussion, it's black and white. You can see like what gaps do we have, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses as a board. So do we need to fill gaps in skills, demographics, lived experiences, personality traits. So for example, if you're missing a board member that has a legal background, it might be good to try to recruit board members that have that background, have that expertise. Someone with government relations experience, a voice from the community that the organization serves. So all this information is helpful, in general in decision making, but also at certain times of specific needs like legal or even a CPA, as to function as a treasurer role. That is very important to being on your board. For example, we worked with the Human Services nonprofit that realized during their annual retreat that the board was, board members were caring, they're passionate members, all about the mission, which is great, but none of them had financial expertise. So recruiting a CPA, they ended up doing that, and a nonprofit grant writer. And so the next year, or in time, they were able to have more meaningful conversations with their auditors as far as reviewing the audit results, recommendations from the auditors to implement within the organization, build stronger internal controls. And then with the use of the grant writer, the board member with the grant writer experience, they were able to bring in more grant funding. So again, always reevaluate, the needs of the organization and how the board can be to be able to help that. Invite candidates who are in line with the organization's missions and goals. Align recruitment with mission critical needs that will improve both capacity and achieving those goals. So it's also important to recruit based on value alignment. Skills are important, but if a candidate doesn't believe in your mission or really isn't ready to engage, then it won't matter how connected or talented they are. So it's a full, well-rounded board members that you're trying to recruit. They have some skill that they can bring to the table or connections, and they are truly passionate about the organization's mission.
Okay. So you've done the hard work, you've recruited the right board members, but now we get to the part that's often overlooked, onboarding. And this is basically where your engagement is going to be built or broken. Onboarding is not just about handing someone a binder and hoping that they figure out their role. It's really an opportunity for you to set the tone, build momentum, and then also help the new members feel confident, connected, and ready to contribute. So, I mean, I guess if you think about it, like starting a new job, right? If you were to come in and not be introduced to your new coworkers, if you don't quite understand what your role is and how you're expected to contribute, you're basically setting yourself up to fail. And that's how many board members feel. They feel like the onboarding is very rushed or that it doesn't exist at all. I'm on the board now. So think about it as strong onboarding can really help ensure that you're aligning with your mission. And then it also helps build accountability from day one. And it may also help increase retention, right? If your new members are not feeling frustrated or lost, they're more likely to stay and be engaged. So we'll walk you through a couple strategies that may seem really simple, but they actually have a really high impact. So when onboarding, the first suggestion that we would make would be maybe host a kickoff session, and not just to go over the bylaws or governance, but to talk about your mission and your goals and the way that you like to approach fundraising. I would say invite the executive director and all the committee chairs to give maybe some brief overviews. Then you're going to give your new members a very clear written statement outlining their responsibilities. It seems almost silly, but your attendance expectations, committee service expectations, how much you're maybe thought that you should be giving, what the different confidentiality requirements are. You can list them all out and then ask the new member to sign it. And it's not just a formality, it's really about clarity and also commitment. Another strategy would be maybe pairing each new member with a seasoned board member. Like we'll go back to the buddy system in elementary school. If they have someone that can help them navigate the first couple meetings, answer their questions, make introductions, that peer support is definitely going to increase the likelihood that your board member is better engaged and feels more confident in the role. It would definitely make a huge difference. Another idea would be introducing your new members in maybe a newsletter if you have it, or everyone has social media now. Maybe a welcome certificate when they come to the first meeting. It's like these tiny small gestures can help make someone feel valued, like they're part of something. And then you also want to make sure the obvious stuff that you're giving them, your board calendar, the roster with contact information, the way your committee's structured, attendance expectations, and then also what your fundraising policies are. And it's 2025, but anything that's digital is always, right? Something that's shared in digital is always going to be a lot better as well. So I know that we have one nonprofit that has a really dynamic board, and one of the things that they do when they do their onboarding is something like a mission immersion kind of thing, where they invite their new board members to a performance or a workshop that, like that has something to do with the way that they function. And then they have a discussion with the program staff. And this gives your new board member an immediate firsthand look. You get to see right away, what is the organization's impact? And, I would think that that's incredibly motivating. At the same time, the nonprofit, takes the time to track engagement and assign their mentors, and their retention rate, at least for their board, is over 90%, which is really something. So basically, I would say the bottom line is if you take the time to onboard effectively, from the very beginning, it's not just about like informing the board members, but you're also going to be inspiring them, right? And you're setting the tone and more likely to have an engaged, high-performing board member.
Okay, I'm going to go over accountability and expectations. So now that you brought in new board members, you've given them a great onboarding experience. How do you ensure they stay engaged and responsible, throughout the year or the term of that they serve on the board? So this is where accountability and expectations come into play. So board members are fiduciaries. They are stewards of your mission, your finances, and your reputation. But too often accountability can get fuzzy, especially when it comes to participation and fundraising. So setting these expectations, having conversations early during the recruitment process and orientation for board members regarding their expectation is key. You don't want them to be not blindsided, but unaware of the involvement that they may need to have throughout the year when they sign up for serving on the nonprofit board. So setting that expectation on, day one in writing is beneficial. When communication can be misinterpreted, but having something in writing, something a new board member can always refer back to if needed. So having a signed board agreement, that can outline your expectations around meeting attendance, committee participation, annual giving, fundraising involvement, and confidentiality and advocacy for the mission. Everything that Erin mentioned previously on the previous slide. But again, that's something important to repeat. When they know what is expected, they're more likely to deliver. And then if they don't, it's easier to have a respectful conversation later. Have this throughout the year or as needed, not once it's gone too far into where the board member is not really engaged. So let them know you're identifying this information, how they're interacting with the board, their contributions earlier on is helpful. So there's different tools that can be used to help track your accountability and the expectations. So attendance tracking, have something like this available for all board members to have access to. So it's visible to everybody who's participating, who's maybe not so much participating, and then it comes clear for the board members, who the key players are. Fundraising, maybe having a give and get policy. So we'll discuss fundraising later on in the next slide, but that is pretty crucial for board members, not only just to be there to help further the mission, but to also have some support, whether may not be able to themselves, but try to recruit other donors to give for the organization. Having a board calendar with key events. So again, a calendar accessible to everybody. This will help improve board member support at the events of the nonprofit, that may be outside the regular board meetings. So if there's any, program sites, that could use some volunteering from the board, or, the fundraising event. So there should be an expectation for board members to contribute their time outside of just the board meeting, the monthly or quarterly board meetings.
I saw in the chat, Tanya, someone had asked, on average, how many people should be on your board? The number 3 for New York State comes to mind, but I would say that from what we see, it's usually on average between like 5 and 15 members. And I don't know if it's so much that you have to have an exact number, but you should make sure that, you have that mix of skills, that you're covering all those key areas: finance, legal, fundraising, people that are just honestly like rah for the mission, right? Like you've got to want to make sure that you've covered all your bases, no matter how many members that may be. And then I don't think that you would have a max. I think it's about the size of your organization and the way that your organization works. So you'd have to check by, depending on what state you're in, if there's any kind of specific state requirement as far as a minimum goes. But I don't believe there's any maximum specified, and you just want to make sure that you're checking all the boxes.
Right. And then there's no max, but you also want to make sure that the board is not too large to where during your board meetings, nothing is really getting done because there's too much conversation having, or,
too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. So you got to find that sweet spot based on the experience that you have. So, boards come in waves. Some months you might be down a few board members, other months, you maybe learn, okay, maybe our board is too big, maybe we need to scale down some. So 3, like Judy is saying in the chat, 3 is the legal minimum in New York State. Your bylaws would also outline, any kind of number of board members and any committees. So certain boards may require committees, and that may need some board members that are within the board, or maybe some from outside the board. So again, it's finding that sweet spot and what works for the organization as far as what should drive the number of board members.
Agreed. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is engaging your board in fundraising strategies for success. And there are many roles that your board members can play when it comes to fundraising. It's not necessarily like, oh, you're on the board, you have to write a check. It doesn't always have to be that way. Of course, yes, they can give their own personal annual gift. That's nice. But they should also consider maybe hosting or inviting friends to events, right? They can help bring in fundraising. Another thing that you can have your board members do, which is probably often overlooked, is have your board members personally thank donors with maybe a card, a note, or even a phone call. And then you're making a stronger connection. Another thing your board members can do, is share their own stories on personal media. So, if they're on their own accounts and they're sharing why this nonprofit means something to them, they're going to attract more. And then also, many times you can use your board members to make introductions to key contacts, and there's value in that as well. So we were looking at some of our nonprofits, and we work with one that uses a model. They call it give, get, or grow. And basically, it means that their board members can give personally, of course, but they can also get others to grow, or they could just help grow the organization through an outreach strategy. And when you're broadening that definition of fundraising, your involvement and your participation is going to jump right up. So another thing, you had talked about accountability, Tanya, and part of that is tracking. So if you have maybe a board dashboard or even a simple tracker, or you're showing attendance, you're showing the giving, you're showing the engagement that board members are doing, and you're reviewing it maybe annually, or, depending on however often you want to, that's like another way that you can help support that continuous fundraising engagement. And it's not about micromanaging, it's more just helping the board to understand that leadership matters, right? And if you make those expectations clear, you align them with your mission, then that accountability will just become part of the culture of the organization, and not like a one-time conversation. You know, you have to do X, Y, Z. Ken likes give and get. Yeah. In the chat.
Okay, so the next 3 slides go over effective board meetings. So there's a lot to go over. This is when all the board members come together, you know, whether in face or virtual, to, you know, effectively, you know, make decisions and, you know, implement policies, whatever the case may be that's on your agenda. But it's, you know, critical to make sure that these meetings are effective. So, you know, pretty much, let's face it, no one looks forward to a board meeting that's disorganized, too long, or packed with reports that could have been emailed in advance. But when meetings are well run, when they're focused and engaged, they become your most powerful tools for board activation and, of course, for the nonprofit. So the first item here is to set clear objectives. You could start by asking, what's the purpose of the meeting? What do we need the board members to know, to discuss, any decision makings, you know, outline this in advance of the meeting. And another option is to set an outline of topics for future board meetings. So, you know, setting the goals for future meetings to help, you know, generate discussions that are important, especially during certain times of the year. So when it's, you know, time to plan for your fundraising event, you know, that could be a key topic that gets brought up. So every agenda should connect to a strategic objective or governance priority, not just updates. Updates from the previous board meeting, you know, those can be sent in advance. So those are all made aware to the board members prior. So your real goal is focusing on what decisions do we have to make today? What do we have to further discuss today? So one of the nonprofits that we work with includes one mission focused item, one strategic item, and one oversight item in every meeting. So having that balance keeps those meetings purposeful and, you know, full of discussion. Create a focused agenda and sticking with that agenda as well. So keep it kind of short, strategic, and time boxed. Send it a week in advance, as well as any other materials that need to be sent with that agenda. So that should be, the board members can absorb what they are walking into in that meeting and what needs to be discussed. The topics on your agenda should be grouped by either fundraising, you know, fundraising category, financing, you know, program related topics, you know, legal topics, and then of course, prioritizing the most important items at the top at the beginning. You know, discussions at the beginning of the meeting are more eventful. Towards the end of the meeting, you know, people might get antsy and are just ready to check out and leave and meet their other commitments or whatnot. So the most prioritizing, most important items should be discussed at the beginning. Allocate time for discussion and try to keep it within that allotted time. You know, sometimes there could be instances where discussions need further topics need further discussion, and that's fine. But you know, try to keep it maintained in the planned time. So distribute your materials early. As I said before, when the agenda goes out, also send the materials out as well. Board packets, financials, reports, background materials. Those should go out about a week before the meeting. So it's less likely for board members to contribute meaningful responses if they're just seeing this information for the first time. Again, having that time to absorb the information before the meetings is more impactful. Using a portal to ensure a secure and easy access for those materials is also great. Our inbox for our emails get flooded. So having a board portal such as Bell's Board, Boardable, Dropbox, or Google Drive, something to house all that information so that when the communication comes out to, hey, you know, this information for our next board meeting is available, please review it prior to the meeting. You know, that could be something that is beneficial for the organization, and it keeps everything contained as well. So you can look back on what was previously provided. Start and end on time. Again, it sounds basic, but it's very important. So that shows that you're respectful of your board members' time by being within those limits. So setting a meeting length, setting a time meeting length, 90 minutes could be a good option, 90 minutes max, and that helps keep the conversation focused and action oriented. So if you only have 90 minutes and you have a lot of items to get through, it can speed up the conversation and decision making. And then lastly here is encourage active participation. Try to avoid one-sided meetings where only maybe the management staff speak or only a few board members dominate the conversation. Again, board members have different personalities. Some are going to be more vocal than others, but again, encouraging participation from everybody is helpful. You could do that through posing thought-provoking questions at the start of the meeting, maybe use polls during hybrid meetings. So, for example, you could start the conversation if there's any trends within the nonprofit sector that we should be focusing on, any program-related information that's provided. Does anything need to be discussed, or what are your thoughts? How can we improve or change on the programs? Again, it all depends on what is on topic in the agenda. You can also think about sharing a 2-minute mission moment at the beginning of each meeting, where a board member will share a short story about a client or the program to set that tone and remind everyone why they are there.
All right, so I'd say now let's build on that foundation. So you've structured your meetings well, you've onboarded, the right board, and now it's about keeping the members engaged and then also accountable during the meeting. So one way to do that is like kind of the same way that they did back in elementary school, where everyone gets a rotating job. Someone takes the lunch order, someone is the line leader, that kind of thing. And it's about assigning rotating roles, maybe. Have a different board member lead the discussion on a particular agenda item one time and then, switch it the next. Rotate your meeting facilitator. Maybe designate someone who doesn't like to talk as much to take notes or help track your action items. You want to focus on mission-centric decisions. You always want to tie your discussions back to the mission so you don't get off course. And whether you're talking finances, HR, programming, you want to remind the board how each decision as you're making them is going to advance your impact. A consent agenda can help you bundle like your routine items. For example, I know lots of times I was the audit liaison at my old job, and I found it to be extremely useful to, instead of having all those specific, you have to make your decisions and whatnot, but instead of going through each individual item where you're spending the whole bulk of the beginning of the meeting, going through each of those routine items, if I bundled them, so past meeting minutes, past committee reports, like all into kind of one vote, this could potentially, if that works for you, help free up some time for you to have like deeper discussions or look deeper at what the decisions are meaning to your organization. But the only way that works is if you are, as Tanya's saying, giving that in advance so that it could be reviewed. It can't be, just in the moment. Another thing would be incorporating your financial oversight. Don't just dump, like we bring a lot of accounting reports to boards, and throwing a 20-page report in front of the board isn't always the most engaging. It's kind of overwhelming. Think about presenting clear or visual snapshots, dashboards, graphs. We find that some are readers, some are visual. And if you have like a good mix, it's more engaging. And then also, I don't know, Tanya, we have one client that likes to start their meetings with the board whenever it's like a financial related meeting. They do like a little financial 101 lesson before the presentation. And now those people that, you have on the board, because they bring XYZ talents, they kind of feel like they're part of the financial discussion as well, because they know what's going on. So it's just 3 minutes, but it gets a lot more. So basically the point is that if you want to create meetings where your board feels equipped and able to help, they, you want them to feel heard. And you also want to make sure you're always aligning with the mission of the nonprofit.
Okay, I'll start to run through these quick because we're getting short on time. So review and follow up on action items. Before you adjourn, summarize your next steps, who's responsible for what, maybe send follow-up emails within a couple of days to outline key takeaways and what the responsibilities were. Evaluate meeting effectiveness. Occasionally send out board member surveys for feedback on meeting structure, value their participation. Depending on the frequency of your board meetings, this could be done, every few months or just on an annual basis. For example, one of our clients sent out a 3-question Google form after their board meetings. It's anonymous and it takes about 30 seconds to get feedback, and that could be helpful to continuously improve the board meetings. Integrate learning and development, dedicate time for brief board education or governance training. That'll keep your board up to date and engaged. Make space for diverse perspectives and decision-making approaches, ensure inclusivity and equity by making sure all voices are heard, not just the most vocal voices in the group. You can do round robin checks, break out into groups, invite quieter members in, and be mindful of how those meetings are structured so it's accessible for everybody to be able to participate, whether your time schedules are different, working parents, members from different time zones. Leveraging technology. So for hybrid or virtual meetings, ensure that you have that strong tech support, your screen sharing, chat features, polls, so it's easily available for everyone to get, and there's no technology hiccups as you start the meeting. And then finally, celebrate the wins. Don't forget to recognize the achievements, milestones, or member contributions to build morale and motivation.
All right, so just some quick points. We're kind of running low, but one of the most important dynamics in a nonprofit board is your relationship between your CEO and your board chair. If this partnership is strong, then your entire board's going to operate more effectively. The first part is understanding that these two individuals are going to act like a central link. If you're taking governance and management, and that's the way to link them, is through a good, strong relationship. If they're able to collaborate, if they could communicate, if they trust each other, that's going to help impact the organization's success. But in order to do that, and this is where it gets kind of fuzzy sometimes, it's important that the CEO and the board chair understand their distinct roles, right? So sometimes they tend to blend, and that's where you can have an issue. Your CEO is responsible for your day-to-day operations. They're the ones managing the staff. They're the ones executing strategy, while your board chair is the one that's leading the board, facilitating the meetings, having the oversight and ensuring that the board is fulfilling its own governance duties. So when those lines get blurred, that's when, when the chair starts micromanaging staff, or when the CEO tries to push onto the board chair's agenda, that's when you have a problem. One of the most important things you can do is have regular check-ins. It's all about open communication. So I know in past places that I had worked, having the CEO and the board chair have that consistent, transparent communication. Maybe they're having a bi-weekly check-in phone call. It doesn't have to be long. What's going on? And it's not just about logistics, but are you seeing any emerging issues, any priorities, any strategy that I need to know about? And that's going to help align messaging. It's going to help prevent surprises. And then it also fosters trust. If you have a great CEO chair duo, they're not just aligned on the mission, they're aligned on how they're going to lead, right? So we've seen at some of our nonprofits, we've seen organizations host leadership alignment retreats. I mean, it might be a little extreme, but they do it for the chair and the CEO. A chance to revisit board goals, talk about shared priorities, discuss how to model healthy governance, because tone at the top is everything. And that helps pay dividends throughout the year. You think of it as like a co-pilot system where they both need to trust each other, but stay in their lane and communicate constantly.
I think we're gonna end now because the other one's gonna begin.
Yeah, we gotta get done.
Yeah.
But we can share. Well, I see people in here asking for some examples, no problem.
Yep.
And also we'll send out our slides. Anything else?
Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah. Just thanking everyone again for attending.
Yes, go get your board members. Go get some good
Good
ones.
ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everyone.